Sup, influencers? Let's get booze.
Listen to Abe Thompson for an hour. I'd rather fuck a blood relative.
It's Abe Thompson.
Ladies and gents, welcome to Abe Thompson and Other Disappointments. It's Friday night. It's 7:30. You're very welcome here. If it's your first time listening, this is your twice, sometimes thrice weekly delve into the worlds of politics, news, dystopia, shit, and more shit. If it's your first time listening, the vibe of the show is very much that the world is fucked. If we're not having our very existence threatened by new variants in a pandemic, we are being warned that, we're only about 3 to 5 years away from having gone past the point of no return, with fossil fuels causing irreparable climate change and either, flooding us or cooking us alive. Nuclear war is on the horizon. That is a very real possibility. Oh, and if the fossil fuels do run out and we conveniently escape the carbon-fueled climate meltdown, well, then society as you know it is over. Then we're really fucked. And where some entertainers and comedians, they might set out to uplift your mood with their content, generate some laughs, improve your sensibilities, please you, if you will. My niche, this show, my vibe, is very much forcing you to look at all of that shit that I just went through, so you're just as depressive about it all as I am. And then we get that, misery loves company thing, that gallows humor, that doom lols thing going on, and then you mistake it for a good time. That's the USP of this show. Some people try and cheer you up with their content. I'm like the sort of I'm like the podcast equivalent of like holding back your eyelids to force you to look at the awfulness, like the shit was Bird Box or something. I'm like, everything is fucked now, drink with me. That's the vibe of this show if it's your first time joining us. Now, listen, if you are a regular listener, you will know this stuff already, but if it's your first time tuning in, we're picking up new listeners all the time. But Wednesday, I usually do a solo show, right? That's where I try to make sense of the senseless. I rail and rant about the state of the world, while on Friday night, like tonight, I usually have a guest in. And tonight, I am very excited to be joined by a fellow podcaster. But he's also a published author of the book Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. I guested on his show a few months ago. I thought we had a really interesting chat about everything from cashless societies to Brexit to the impotence of the modern Labour Party. And tonight, we, dear listeners, binfluencers, people of the booge, we are repaying the favour. So please welcome to the show my guest this evening. You guys are going to love him. He's host of the Chatter podcast, which you can find on the Gist website. He's equal parts insightful and charming. Please welcome to the show, Josh Hamilton. Woo! Josh, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for the beautiful intro.
Well, you're very welcome. You've earned it, pal. How's your week been?
Good. Actually, pretty good. Very busy. Very, very busy. Got a lot of fun things lined up for my own podcast. So
okay,
I'm very much head down in that, making clips.
Do you want to
more clips?
Do you want to give people
YouTube shorts?
Yeah, it's endless, isn't it? It's tedious as well. Like, do you want to give people a bit of an intro about your show, about like sort of your vibe, where you're coming from?
Yeah, definitely. So my show is me interviewing people one-on-one. Sometimes on Zoom, sometimes in person, trying to get a studio together and do all of them in person, but that's a slow build.
Yeah.
Basically, I thought that the UK had a beautiful gaping hole in its media and podcast offerings, in that no one was stupid enough to talk to everyone from really serious professors to absolute like stark raving lunatics.
Yeah.
And I felt like that could totally be my niche.
Oh, which did I mean, I'm not an academic, so do I fall into the latter? Or
well, you're probably the everything in between.
Okay, good recovery. Yeah. Okay, can we touch on some of the lunatics? Are you allowed to name and shame?
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think that I think most of them aren't lunatics, but they would be portrayed as being crazy. And I find that the longer you sit down and talk to people who are portrayed as crazy by clickbaity headlines, the more reasonable they start to seem, or at least even if their ideas for how the world might improve may not be what you would believe. Mostly everyone's after the same thing, which is like peace, happiness, and prosperity.
Yeah. And a shot, just a chance to change a situation, I think, is a real common thread for a lot of people. And you're right. Like, I mean, I've spoken to a few academics and a few journalists and a couple of people who sit on the other side of the political fence to me. And I think you'd be surprised how well you can get along with people, how much of a decent transactional conversation most people could have with somebody that they would think they would disagree with, you know?
Yeah, no, 100%. So that's what I found through doing the podcast. I'm at 324 episodes.
Fuck.
So like, yeah, so I've spoken to people. Yeah, I've spoken to people who are crazy and have wild ideas in every direction on the political spectrum, and it's really entertaining to basically just sort of let them have the space to explain why they think this.
Yeah,
because that's the fascinating bit about it. Because like you can listen to someone say something really insane and then be like, right, okay, why?
Yeah.
And then they have to explain themselves, and either they come out with something that you're totally not expecting, or their answer just doesn't stand up and they fall to pieces, and then you've learned even more.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I mean, so it sounded at the beginning of this conversation as though you were going to say, you know, sometimes you think that you're going to disagree with people, and then when you actually sit down and listen to them in a calm environment where you're not, you know, bombarded with these caricatures and quotes that are taken out of context, that you can kind of see where they're coming from. But then,
I still disagree with people all the time.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny because then it sounded like you led me up the garden path a bit there, and then you were like, oh, but sometimes they're just, you know, sometimes you give them like rope to hang themselves with, and they're like, oh wow, no, you are a loony. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can tell as soon as people's like basic ideas start falling apart under like three basic questions.
Yeah.
Then you can tell that they haven't thought about it, and then people tend to get like a bit like angry,
defensive,
or like defensive, which is always fun because I can just sit there and be like, this is fine, this is my show.
Yeah.
Like I could, like, if you come across as a dick, I get all the marketing, like, you know, hate clicks, outrage.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting there being like, come on, be controversial. Say something that I can get to go viral, please.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? Like, just
come on and just say you want to shoot the boats.
Yeah.
Like, just say you want to hit them with snipers.
But then, do you know what? Like, so I agree. I think it is. It is like, obviously there is there's collateral to having a clip like that. But then I kind of hate that that's true. Also, like, I think there's enough stuff out there that is incredibly reliant on having like a spicy debate or saying something controversial, and it's kind of, that feels like that's half the fucking problem now, is that anyone that says something slightly controversial will immediately be amplified. Like I was talking to my girlfriend last week about this. I was like, how fucking wild is it that, as like, I don't really do stand up anymore, but like, coming from that world, I was like, how wild is it that you can fight and you can gig and you can just you could expend 15 years of your life just desperately trying to make it as a stand-up and never get any coverage in any newspaper. And yeah, I was like, how wild is it if you were a stand-up comedian, a white guy, and you put on a show at the Edinburgh Fringe and the title of the show was like the N-word, right? It would fucking sell out. It would be in every newspaper. Everyone would be talking about how controversial it is. Like, it would be you can get to the thing that you're after, but you've just got to decide how outrageous and awful do you want to be. And I feel like that's the weight thing with a lot of like news and podcasts and, you know, content. And
yeah, I mean, I've thought about it because you know some of those podcasts, like the Whatever podcast or Fresh and Fit, or that girl Just Pearly Things, like all these, they have mastered the algorithm. They are fucking brilliant at like creating clickbaity titles,
Mm.
but they're all like, most of them will be like, this stupid idiot says this, and I've looked at them and like been like, right, okay, so they've been like really successful marketing their clips. Like, what can I learn from what they've done?
Right.
And I'll look at it and be like, "Ugh, but I don't want to insult my guests on the clip titles." Do you know what I mean? Like, if I had like a really nice conversation with someone but disagreed with them, and at the end, like a week later, they look on my channel and the title's like, "You'll never believe what this idiot says." And it's like, they're not going to want to come back on the show.
Yeah, it's like I mean, I would also feel like, as well as in like worrying that you were insulting your guests, I think you sort of sell your audience short. Like, I really feel like there's this idea with, especially with YouTube, that everyone that watches it is just a fucking idiot moth going towards the flame. So like, oh my God, like this guy destroys that guy. Well, I have to watch that. I feel like there's this whole other market of people like you, like me, like, you know, whoever else, people that we interact with socially, who use YouTube as like, you know, a half credible academic research, and we're genuinely flicking through to see, you know, a table discussion about institutional racism or whatever. I don't want to see all the thumbnails of like somebody going, oh, like shocked and explosions in the background and, you know, over-ramped shit constantly.
Yeah, like a 1 minute 20 video be like, "Professor completely debunks critical theory." And it's like, in a minute and 20 seconds? Like,
yeah. He's a fast operator, that guy. Anyway, yeah, so it's I don't know, it's a funny world, isn't it? Podcasting. It feels like the new of the new media, or newest of the new media.
Which is funny because it's been around like 10 years at this point. 11 years, something like that.
Did you do another podcast before you did Chatter, like years before? I'm just curious.
No. I just it's been running for like about 5 or 6 years, like on and off. Because I used to run this bar in Austria during the winter, so I'd do that for 5 months straight, and then take 7 months off and write and do podcasts.
Yeah,
which was lovely. I wish I could still do that.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good life, to be fair.
It was till COVID stopped to that. Unfortunately, it was the most wonderful setup until there was no bar.
I mean, in some ways, that's really the greatest tragedy of COVID, I guess.
I would personally agree.
Yeah. Let's talk
a bit. Think of anything worse.
Let's talk a bit about politics, because one of the things that you and I touched on your show was the, I don't want to say shortcomings of the modern Labour Party, because that sort of insinuates that they have been in power, that they've fallen short in what they've been able to achieve politically. But in some ways, it is kind of an accurate way, like, because people associate Labour with representing the workers' movements and representing social justice and progressive sensibilities and stuff. And I remember on our chat on your show, I feel like we both agreed that they just don't do enough for just regular working people. I'm not even talking about, you know, the sons and daughters of people who used to work down the mines, like that kind of labour movement. I literally mean just regular motherfuckers out there who were just getting in their car, going and working in the call centre, coming back home, struggling to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Labour seem, I don't know, sort of caught between this, like, quote unquote, like woke space. They get a lot of flack for that, but also they get castigated for being like Tories with red ties, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere in between those two places is where Labour, that's the space that Labour have inhabited. I'm curious to see, like, what do you think they are likely to be able to achieve if and when they get into power? Because that's going to be the pivot point, right? And you sounded frustrated with them when you and I were chatting. You were like, I just want them to fucking, you know, help actual people's situations instead of banging on about like, this stuff is nonsense, that stuff doesn't matter, focus on what is actually affecting people. And I agree. Like, so when they get into power, this is a really long question, I'm so sorry, when they get into power, what would you like to see them actually do?
It's all right. I totally ask super long questions all the time. What would I like to see them do? The 2017 Labour manifesto in as close as is possible.
Right.
That is the best, like, because I can give you lots of specific examples about things that I would personally want, or things that, like, but that is the most comprehensive, like, document that I have ever seen that came close to addressing what I see to be quite a lot of the systemic issues within the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people could say that, like, it's a little bit too, like, it gives the state a little bit too much power in some areas, but ultimately all those places where where we're saying, okay, you know, the state shouldn't be involved in energy, water, public transport, any of these things, it's like we're already paying for it.
Yeah.
Right. And the only difference is that the money gets farmed off to offshore corporations. Money gets, like, fucking siphoned and funneled off along the way to the lawyers, to the accountants, into the tax havens, and then into some fucking, through like a billion different shell corporations, and eventually to some, like, subsidiary of, like, Serco that will provide the shittiest version of whatever public service that you could possibly provide, with 0-hour contracts, no benefits to like the employees that they're milking until they can find someone stupid enough or poor enough to do it even cheaper.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like, it's like a systemic rot where we've just allowed, like, corporate capital to inhabit all of these government, like, services and institutions. And the 2017 Labour Manifesto went some way to attempting to remove that massive parasite upon the state. And so that's, like, if you want, like, a broad answer, like, that's what I would say.
It's a really important point to nail home, isn't it? That the state still picks up the tab even when you privatize these things. And it's not necessarily, like, sometimes it's in an immediate sense, in that you'll have privatized, formerly public. So like a train line, for example, used to be publicly owned. It was funded by taxpayers. And then somebody, probably in a Tory government, was like, do you know what? Let's privatize this. We'll give it to our mates. And you think, okay, privatize, so that takes some weight off the taxpayer. We don't have to fund it anymore. Well, no, like, you're not completely off the hook there. We're still subsidizing, like, a lot of that. There's still loads of tax money that's going into running rail, right? The kind of the similar thing with the NHS as well. Like, you know, they'll privatize a lot of it, but there'll always be tax money funneled into it, rightly or wrongly. And I think then less immediate is this thing that you're alluding to, which is a really important thing to expose people to, is that if you make the general public suffer through lower wages because you've privatized a thing, and now that company have to pay shareholders, they have to make a profit, they have to pay their staff less. Well, now the staff members who are earning less, maybe now they're pushed into a bracket where they have to get universal credit. Maybe now they're pushed into a bracket. So the state are then having to come to the rescue of these people. You're not really saving any fucking money. You're actually just increasing poverty, right?
Yeah. And, like, the other key thing is the financialization of, like, the entire like, corporate architecture that you're farming all of these things out to is through, because they're all set up as, like, tax haven based entities, where things funnel through a million different shells in order to get the most tax benefit. But every time you jump through all these hoops, like accountants, lawyers, like trust holders, they're all taking their little fees, and that's just, like, funneling it offshore and then gone, never to be seen again. And instead of that money just going straight from the taxpayer's purse to a government funded, like, whatever, however you want to call it, like a government run or a government owned privately run corporation, which is like how a lot of these things used to be set up. So it was like government owned, money went back into the thing or returned to the taxpayer, and then people had stable jobs. And you know, if the service was shit because, like, the local government was doing a bad job of running it, do you know what you could do? You could fucking vote them out and be like, sort this shit out. Like, instead of just, like, endlessly praying that whatever iteration of the neoliberal cunts that have been inhabiting the number 10 Downing Street since 1979, just to pray that they might not completely trash, like, everything about the ordinary people's lives of the country for the profit of the very, very rich. And that's That's ultimately what has happened, and I just would love that not to be the case for even like 5 years. Just let us see what it might look like.
I'd just like to see somebody make the case clearly, coherently, in, you know, on Question Time, Newsnight, I don't give a fuck, like at the dispatch box, wherever, somebody to just communicate this in a way that is consumable by the masses and it actually gets picked up and understood, is that if you have monopoly services, like a local
the
hospital...
public knows this, is what I would say. Because, like, if you look at, like, all the YouGov polling that's been done on attitudes towards nationalization, like, there is over majority support for like water, energy, healthcare, public transport, and post. Like, all of them have more than 50% support.
Yeah,
easy, done. Like, it's not something that the public is like needs to be convinced about. Unfortunately, it's what happens is, like, a political party feigns that they're going to sort these problems out. You know, they tap into whatever, like, the public's desire to have, because, like, I think people inherently know that that's just, like, ultimately going to be at least a more secure and, like, beneficial service for the local community. Even, like, say in cases where there's, like, privately run things that work wonderfully, there are hundreds of them. Like, a lot of healthcare in Europe is privately run in a way that works beautifully. But, like, it's fine. You can have those, but, like, if you want stability and something where you can have, like, direct influence and accountability for the people who are meant to be running it, like, I don't see how that is ever, like, a worse idea in a situation where there is no competition to like drive people's desire to be better. You know, in all of those things, it's something where it's almost impossible to have direct competition in the way that a free market can work. Free market's awesome for a lot of stuff, but it's not always perfect, and the stability provided to those things would be amazing, and I guarantee it would secure a lot more jobs and allow people to have better bargaining power.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, but like, there's also this idea that, or rather the defence that always gets wheeled out by Tories is like, look, it's not the state's business to run X. You know, the state shouldn't be getting involved in running railways and so on. I'm always like, I don't know if that really stacks up when you're a big government conservative party. Like, they have no issue with, like, stepping in where the state actually has no business stepping in normally. And also there's this idea that like people will hark back to the day, you know, the 70s or the 80s when British Rail was literally British Rail, and it faltered. It didn't have the great reputation. Or they'll say, oh, have you ever tried queuing up at your local town hall to pay a parking ticket? Or you've tried to phone up. I'm always like, yeah, because you motherfucker, like, you defund or you underfund these public services so that they falter, they are suboptimal, and then that gives you the recourse when somebody says, oh, how come it's not working? Oh, well, because it's publicly funded. You know, if you want a decent service, that's something that the private sector does better. It's like, we need to find a way to I mean, you say that a lot of people understand this already. You could be right, but I feel like we need to market that in a way where that is the dominant narrative that's getting waterboarded to people.
But, like, do you know what the problem is, right? Okay, so what happened? Because I had this fucking argument with Gemma Forte from the Troll like 2 weeks ago, and she was
wait. Did you cut it and edit it and call her an idiot, or like?
No, sadly not.
Good. No. We love Gemma. Carry on. Yeah. Sorry.
So we had this argument, like, and she was like, she said, "Oh, all we need is Labour with you know, the right leader." And I was like, we had the guy with all the one that said all the things. He laid it out. He created this manifesto that I think is probably like the best estimation of what Britain could really benefit from. And what did they do? The press destroyed the man's reputation, and even then he still continued. Do you know the things that I honestly believe stopped him getting over the line? Was the fucking cunts in his own party undermining him, right? And the Ford report proved that they were doing it. They were undermining him because they didn't want him in power. That's within his own party.
Did they not read? Did they not want him in power, or did they not think he was capable of winning power, so they wanted to oust him? Because that's two different.
Either way, you don't, like, in the middle of an election cycle, you don't just start sabotaging yourself from the inside.
No, I agree.
That's a horrendous idea.
Yeah.
And they all publicly were like, let's get on board. And then the table started to turn. Like they were surging in the polls when Theresa May was like, the Labour MPs should have smelt blood and been like, right, yes. But you know what the problem is? They do not give a fuck about what Jeremy Corbyn stood for or the people of this country, right? The ones that decided that him not getting into power was more important to them than the idea that, someone might have some great ideas about how to make the country just a little more prosperous for the ordinary person on the street. And they were just like, well, no, we'd rather we have our stupid little infight here. We are going to sabotage this.
Okay, so let me just interject there for a second. So in principle, I agree. I think, firstly, that manifesto was fucking great. And I think that was evidenced by every time they went out on the street and they did Vox Pops, or if you checked YouGov or whatever, the polling for each one of those policies in the manifesto was so fucking strong. People were like, yeah, I like that. Yes, that makes sense. Things like nationalisation, things like, was it 2017 was the free Wi-Fi policy? I can't remember now. There was a national education service they were talking about to increase social mobility, social housing built. Like, everything within that manifesto was a fucking win with people. Now, here's where maybe you and I diverge somewhat. So I accept that there were probably people within his own party that were working against him. I think that was probably rooted in a battle for the soul of the, former Blairites who felt like the party should be a little bit more like that, and they felt like Corbyn was a threat to them. So there's a tribal element, possibly. I also think maybe they doubted that he could win the election, and actually it was better to get rid of him and then get a quote unquote real leader in. I think.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what's the problem with let's give it all we got? Because if you're a Labour MP, okay, you're meant to care.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You're meant to actually give a fuck. Okay? That's what they tell us.
Yeah.
Right? And if you genuinely care and you look at the other option, right? More of the Tories.
Yes, agree.
More bullshit state-sponsored corporatism where the taxpayer is just being milked while friends and donors of the Conservative Party line their fucking pockets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you look at that and you go, do you know what's more important here? Is my little infight, this little bullshit thing that I have about Corbyn and, the Blairite, fucking Corbynite thing. If that is to me more important than after 40 years of the British taxpayer being slowly fucked. Instead of that, we're going to have our little fight. And instead of trying to, maybe we're going to get into power. Maybe we can do something about this. And then we can have our little infight. No. Their little infight was more important than the people they're meant to represent. That's what it says to me.
So I accept that. And I think that equally, I find that just as disgusting then as I find it now when people from, what is perceived to be the far left of Labour now working against the Labour leader to keep Labour out of power at the forthcoming election. I do believe that sort of guiding principle of getting power, attaining power so you can actually affect change. That's where that should be your foundation before you start getting into any tribal arguments and bullshit. However, the thing I was going to say was, and this is coming from a really good place. I'm just genuinely curious to hear what your sense is of this. Do you think Corbyn and Team Corbyn bear any responsibility for the failure of that election, and specifically around, so you mentioned the mauling that he got by the media. Is there not a case to be made that a good leader, or what we understand to be a good leader, would be able to unite that party, handle that criticism? I mean, look, the papers are not working for Keir Starmer now, but he's still maintaining this 29-point lead, right? So if the right-wing papers don't want a Labour leader, they don't like Starmer, but they also didn't like Corbyn, is there not a case to be made that this is actually down to his inability to lead?
Yeah, okay, so Jeremy Corbyn and the Corbyn campaign definitely made, like, tactically, politically, many mistakes. Like, I think it was a mistake, unfortunately, to have his friend Diane Abbott in the cabinet. Way too much criticism. She should have just said, he should have been honest with her and been like, I'm sorry. You know, even if he genuinely believed that she would be fantastic at the job, I'm sure he did, and I'm sure there's many people who do.
Yeah.
Liability she shouldn't have been part of. Like, that was a huge point where they got him, where he could have sidestepped that. Would have been no need for it. They handled the IRA thing really badly, because he consistently said, I condemn all paramilitary violence and all violence. And I was like, I do agree 100%. That's the line. But all you got to do first is say, yeah, I condemn the IRA violence, and I condemn all paramilitary violence. And then you would have shut down the argument. You would have just, like, the whole, Corbyn refuses to condemn IRA violence. I have no idea how many times I saw that headline.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All he had to do was, like, I condemn all IRA violence and all paramilitary violence. There was loads of mistakes like that, really critical little things that you could have look, you're not compromising your principles in saying that, man. That's just the way you've said it. There's nothing about that is not exactly the same as I condemn all violence. All you're doing is answering their question and being specific about it in order to stop their stupid question. Because it's awful journalism, but, like, you got to fucking expect that. Do you know what I mean?
So do
like,
you though? Do you, like, see,
the awful journalism?
Well,
I mean,
here's where I get really, like, utopian and sort of, fantasist about it. But, like, so, I'm asking you what you think realistically could be implemented and achieved with a Labour government without, devaluing the currency and spooking the markets. Because clearly, if you start writing checks for money that we don't have in the treasury, like, 30 billion for this, 50 billion for that, people are going to get spooked in the same way that they were with the trust and the Kwarteng shit. So there is a limit to what they can do.
But they haven't been spooked. Like what was the national debt? I'm going to Google this. What was the national debt in 2010?
Oh, I'm sure it's less than it is now. Yeah.
Not less. It is, like, orders of magnitude less.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane.
Yeah. But I just mean, like, if and when Labour get in, or it's like a Labour-led government, and they start saying free Wi-Fi, free national education service, and all of these things have a price tag, right? So it's 6 billion here, 10 billion there. Are we going to get into a situation where investors are going to go, right, the UK is spending a lot of money, it doesn't really stack up, so I'm going to sell my bonds. And all of those bonds are linked to UK pensions, and then the pension sector starts to wobble again. We're back in the same situation we were in October. So it's like, there is a limit. We have to accept there's a limit of what they can implement.
Yeah.
And here we are talking about what was great in 2017. I'm like, yeah, I agree. All of that was great. But what would you actually like, or what can you expect to see?
What can we expect to see?
Yeah.
Those are two very, 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 very different things. Just as a record, the national debt is currently 2.3 trillion, which is about 100% of GDP. When the Conservatives took over, it was down at less than 40% of GDP.
Yeah.
So, and given that GDP has grown in that period, it's basically more than doubled.
Yeah. So with all the money that we get coming into the UK every year, UK PLC, the debt that we're currently saddled with.
Every single penny that is created in value through the entire UK in 1 year, we have that in debt.
Yeah. Oh, and round of applause for the Party of Fiscal Responsibility, everyone.
Yeah. And we will get more of this with Keir Starmer. This is what I kept repeating to Gemma. And if it comes down to it, and I get into the voting box, and my two options are have more Tories or stick with a Labour MP. I'll go Labour. I'll do it. But they're gonna give us just a light brand of of the same shit that we've had.
But here
it's
we
not,
are.
That's what I'm saying, because like we've watched him roll back every single promise.
I agree, but
We've watched him now go on to talk about how we need privatization in the NHS.
Well, yeah, because like here's the disconnect that I'm not really understanding here. So you want to see meaningful change. You want to see policies that are implemented, each of which we understand that there's a price tag. But we're also saying that the debt is so high that we're criticizing that he won't have the ability to actually implement anything.
Yeah, well, no, my point about the debt is like, right, okay, so for the past 13 years, all of the money that we have created has just disappeared into the assets and bank accounts of the richest people in the country. Right. That's basically where all the new wealth creation has gone since 2008. Right. And if that is an acceptable use of this money, why the fuck is building hospitals? Right? How is that not? And that, because do you know what happens when you go, right, okay, so we're going to hire some local construction crews to go and build this new hospital. Do you know what happens? The money goes into their pockets, and then they go out into the local economy and spend it instead of, oh, right, well, let's pump another couple, 10, 20 billion into the market through quantitative easing. And do you know where that goes? That goes straight into the asset prices of the top, 1% of people. That pumps up their fucking asset values, and the money just sits there at the top. Yeah. Right? Instead, the thing that the radical, brilliant, seemingly very obvious thing that Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell proposed was to just take that money creation ability, but spend it on stuff we need. And I, you can, and I don't see how it's irresponsible to suggest that, because what we'll get if we continue down this path is just more debt creation, but for no value for the people who are fucking working and paying the tax. Instead, I would like us to try this radical different approach where we spend the money on stuff we need. I
mean, I agree. I just can't see these policies getting implemented. Certainly not. And sort of to bring it back to where I was saying, this is where I get a bit fantastical, a bit utopian about things. It's like, I can't see those kinds of policies, that manifesto from 2017 getting rolled out until, bit of a curveball here, bit of a segue, until we get meaningful press regulation, right? Because it was, and I'm not disagreeing with you that around that GE, that the press played a hugely significant part in swinging that election. And we both know that the press in the UK is horrendously biased, that it's so rooted in newspaper culture, tabloid culture, and the majority of those newspapers are right wing. So until that gets sorted, and until there's some sort of penalty for newspapers publishing opinion as a front page headline, for example, as though it's fact. Like your mate will walk past the 24-hour garage, glance across the Mail, the Sun, the Telegraph, the Express, all of these dominant right-wing newspapers, and they'll all have like a great big black and white bold headline saying like, loser Corbyn says this, or like, now Starmer said, like, fury erupted last night. It's like, no, guys, come on. This is not the news. This has to be regulated. So I'd like to see that happen, and then maybe after that we could have a meaningful conversation.
I wouldn't go as far as saying they can't print opinion as headlines.
Really?
I don't know. That's for me. That becomes like a slippery slope. I don't like. I'm very, very anti-regulation of things people say, or can say or write.
Opinion though. It's like
even that.
Like
even
we know
that.
it's.
What I would say is the way, like what you could do is you could fine them for demonstrable falsehoods. Fine them a lot more. That's the way I think you would go with it, because then there would be a requirement for more rigorous fact checking, and I would also say that probably one of the biggest things that you could do would be to like get the BBC basically as far away from any government influence whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like the government should not have a say over BBC funding. they shouldn't have a say over who gets employed there. Like, and I know that's kind of what it's like at the minute, but it's clearly not how it works.
No.
You know, like a more independent BBC would, I think, probably go quite a long way towards raising the editorial and, you know, news standards of the country. But I think you have to let people say whatever stupid, wild shit they want to say.
See, I half agree with you. I feel like, okay, so with the BBC stuff, yes, I agree. I feel like that should be managed, run, funded by some sort of independent council.
Yeah.
I mean,
because the BBC used to be more independent.
Yeah.
And they used to be less scared of criticizing the government. And that's when you talked about, like, obviously there were still times when they were fucking pulling the you know, the establishment line. Obviously. And then there was, you know, MI5, MI6 had like a concerted campaign to make sure no left-wing journalists got anywhere near the top echelons of the BBC for like 50 years.
What?
That's real.
Really?
Yeah, no, that's real. That's real. Like, you can look that up. Like,
see, this is why I wanted you on, Josh. I was like, he's going to tell me, he's going to educate me. That's amazing. I'll. Did you read that? Is that in a book somewhere, or is there blogs about it?
I'm pretty sure it was a BBC article.
Fucking hell. There you go, guys, dear listeners.
Yeah, they used to get like a file, and they get like a stamp on their file that said like communist or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so
here it is. Evolve politics. The BBC worked directly with MI5 to bar left-wing journalists and prevent a left-wing British government.
When was this?
April 2018. This came out.
Fucking hell! What? Wait, hang on. So was the expose then, or was were the events that they were talking about recent?
No, the events they were talking about were from 1933 through till about the mid-90s. When
you said 2018, I was like,
oh no, it wasn't still going on in 2018. Yeah. No, we found out that it happened in 2018.
Oh, God, it's infuriating. So when they said that they were they were like enclosing or sealing Prince Philip's will for 75 years. I was like, 75 years? What the fuck is in there? Yeah, like nobody knows where he's left his money or who he's left, you know, 100 grand here to, or like, it just makes you think like how many, you know, illegitimate children, or like
couple of mil to the Epstein.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, what are you hiding? Okay, so something else I wanted to ask you about was, and you know, we were touching on, you know, quantitative easing, printing money, devaluing the currency, and spending money that we don't have, and obviously all of this ripple effects out into things like the housing crisis. And I'll just very quickly touch on the context of that for any listeners that are unaware as to like why that affects things. So if a government print a shit ton of money, that money, that currency becomes worth less. And so if you're a grandma or somebody's retired father and you've got 300 grand sitting in your bank account that you've, you know, your life savings, your pension that you've managed to withdraw a shit ton out of, and you're looking for an investment, and bonds, which used to be a sort of, you know, relatively safe, if lower interest investment to get a return of every year, if bonds are paying fuck all, which they were, you know, over the last 15 years, you might start to look at maybe buying up a 1-bed flat or a 2-bed flat or a maisonette or something to then rent out. And so that has this ripple effect. More houses getting bought up, fewer houses for people to get on the ladder with, etc., etc. Plus, the money that you save as a young person, thinking that you're going to get on the ladder, gradually, every 6 months, every year, every couple of years, the money you saved that sat in the savings account is worth less and less and less. So, given that that's the situation in the UK, Josh, trying to keep these questions short, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right.
Given that that's the situation in the UK, there's this sort of domestic, GB-centric thing in my head where I'm like, okay, look, the UK's fucked. But not everywhere in the world is the UK. So there must be somewhere else out there. I mean, yes, we've got Brexit. You know, we're trying to juggle that. We're trying to fix that. We're trying to find our place in the world after the empire and the colonies and stuff. But there must be somewhere out there that there isn't a housing crisis, crippling inflation, you know, somewhere that isn't struggling to meet net zero and that's having its own impacts. And Like, where can we move to, Josh? Why is every fucking country out there? I was looking at Australia. I was looking at New Zealand. I was looking at America. Everywhere's got inflation. Everywhere's suffering from housing challenges.
Yes.
What's like? Where do I move to,
Well,
Josh?
I mean, I would say this is the result of 40 years of neoliberalism,
Right.
because unfortunately, that's the fiscal and political ideology that's been exported from the Chicago boys in America since the 60s, basically. It finally took hold around 1980 and has been destroying the global economy ever since.
And could we just sort of break down neoliberalism a little bit? Because I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So
I was about to say I don't know how many of my listeners will, but actually, the honest truth is I'm like I don't know.
it's fair.
So yeah, shoot.
Okay, so basically, in a very broad sense, it can be defined by like three main tenets, which are basically massive deregulation, sale of all state assets, and privatization of as many public services as possible.
Okay.
Tax cuts for the rich, maybe in there too. And in this weird twist, what seems to have happened is that in order to still pretend like they care or like this ideology cares, it's very much got wrapped up in like a very like cosmopolitan liberalism in the same way. Like, you know, it was Cameron's heavily neoliberal conservative party that were the ones that, you know, legalized gay marriage, for example, in the UK. You know, they've like dressed themselves up in the outfit of tolerance and acceptance in order to get away with the horrendous financial rape of the country.
Right.
And that's basically what I think Keir Starmer is doing too. So yeah, it's essentially it's massive deregulation and privatization of everything possible. So it was like popularized mainly by this guy Milton Friedman.
Okay.
And his theory was that like if you were to shock a country or an economy to a point where you could wipe everything away and create a blank slate with like zero regulation and the perfect conditions, that you could create the ultimate economy.
Right.
So disaster capitalists since about 1978 or 9, whenever he went in to consult for Pinochet in Chile, they have basically been pushing this around the world. So every time you see a disaster, a war, a hurricane, like any financial crash, you watch, and the neoliberals will be there to carve up the carcass and figure out what else they're going to privatize. Like it happened when we had like the big economic crash, sort of end of the 70s. Thatcher came in and was like, okay, well, you know, we have to throw everything out. So, you know, she went on a fire sale of state assets, started privatizing like fuck, deregulated the banks, which is ultimately what led to the 2008 crash. Then you got you know, Tony Blair come in the mid 90s, did this next like, oh, you know, we've had Thatcher, but now we're going to make things better, and started with all his PFI contracts that cost us billions, you know, started farming out things, the privatization of the NHS. Then you got the Tories 2010 come in and they're like, well, there's no money, time to like, you know, we gotta privatize some stuff, we gotta make some savings. And then George Osborne like starts another fire sale that would make Margaret Thatcher blush. Like they sold off everything, and then they sold off even the bits that were making the money. Like they started this green investment bank in like 2011. Like it was one of the Lib Dems' big flagship policies. They funded it. It was finally becoming a profitable like institution that the government could use to invest in like cool emergent technologies, like efficient like energy things, like renewables, all the sort of stuff, you know, you want
right now.
And yeah. Do you know what they did in 2018? They sold it off to a conglomerate of banks, like just famous for asset stripping public services.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, so when you talk about this stuff, and as I say, I'm not coming from a position of strength or great knowledge about neoliberalism, but it's interesting that when we're sort of pinballing from old like Thatcherite conservatism to Blairite Labour back to Cameron, and to a lot of people these would feel like opposites. They would feel like, left to right and right back to left again. But actually, what you're
but
suggesting
they're
is like,
bouncing around inside this very narrow, like you just got to imagine, like whereas, okay, maybe they disagree slightly on like where some of the funding should come from, or like just how much tax there should be. But you know what they've all decided not to do? Close all the tax havens. Like stop the people, like just decided to offshore all their money. Do you know what they haven't done? Tried to make life better for ordinary people. Like, I mean, Blair did a lot of things that helped like ordinary people, but in the background, he was still doing all the same stuff.
Yeah.
Like him and Gordon Brown oversaw like from 97 to 2007. Are you telling me that there's no way that they could see that maybe some more regulation in the financial industry might have not been the worst idea? You seriously telling me a man that's smart, right? Gordon Brown is incredibly intelligent operator. You seriously telling me they didn't see problems coming, or did they just not care because everyone was making so much money and stuffing the party pockets with it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in that sense, that's my worry for when they get in power, is that it will basically be the same. And in some ways, they are slaves of the same apparatus as the Conservative Party are, because even when they're in power, even when they're out of power, they're so reliant on donations for funding that they will make deals with devils. They will. Do you know what I mean? Like, they will.
I would love to see that actually. I'd love to see publicly funded elections based on, and so like everyone, like all political parties over the same size, like get the same amount of like money to spend, the same amount of like TV ad space just given to them, and then maybe there could be a bonus for like if you have like for number of members. But then after that, like I think all of the passion that people have should come from. Like all of the campaigning should be done on the street.
Yeah.
Like it's the strength of your idea is based on how many people you can get to knock on doors and have an actual conversation with someone. That's where the main power should come from.
Yeah. Do you think it will ever get to that though, or do you think it'll actually get worse, like sort of US style? Like I can totally see them diluting election rules so they're because
they want to get rid of the Electoral Commission.
Yeah, or they want to neuter it at least. Make it not independent any longer.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it going both ways. They might choose to do something and make it more impotent, or reduce some of the rules on like where the money can come from or like how it can be spent. But equally, I would hope maybe that if we ever get this fictional person who can push these ideas in an articulate way that resonates with people, that maybe we're not too far gone. Because as much as I'm very aware of how fucked we are, I also like to hope that we're not.
Yeah, I mean that's where we diverge opinions again. Is like I feel quite confident that like we are fucked.
What do you think the biggest reason we're fucked is?
Wow. I think central to my belief that we're fairly doomed is I have a fairly strong belief that the people who are in power, the people who actually have the ability to affect change, to write the checks that we were alluding to earlier, to implement the new processes and protocols that we actually all need to improve our lives and to give ourselves that shot that I was talking about earlier. Those people, I don't think they even believe that we are not fucked. And I think they know that this is, last hurrah. They're all at the bar at the Titanic, and that their idea is to make deals with fracking companies, make a quick sly billy on the side, have it funneled out to a shell company, which then reroutes it to another shell company. And slowly but surely they amass a pile of money, buy an island, fuck off just before the whole thing comes down. That's honestly what I think is happening. Because I think if they, like, some of them are intelligent, maybe not your Scott Bentons and your fucking Mark Francois, but some of them with their hands on the levers are smart people, very well educated. And I think they know what's happening, and if they thought they could save it, I think maybe they would kick into gear and try and do something. But I think the fact that they don't either speaks to this idea that they are all genuinely like just deluded sociopaths, or they know that we're really doomed.
I think quite a lot of the really, really rich and powerful people already know.
Mm.
That's why they're all building bunkers,
Mm.
you know, and buying private islands and buying up all the farmland.
Have you seen?
Like,
did you watch Don't Look Up? That movie?
no, actually, I never saw it.
Oh, it's great. It's a really. I mean, obviously, it's about the climate crisis,
Yeah.
kind of. But it's written around. You know, the metaphor for that is that this great big meteor is about to hit the Earth. And so in this film, it's it's all politicized, but it's the reason I bring it up is because towards the end, all of the rich people, all of the billionaires and the presidents all just get on a fucking spaceship and fuck off. They're just bye, no fucks given.
That's what's going to happen.
Yes.
Like, realistically. This is why we have to fix it. Because I think you're right. There's and I was talking to, who was I talking to about this? I can't remember. Anyway, our main point was that, like, this is a slow motion car crash, and the amount of hurt and pain that we will have to go through in order to reach a moment where we actually get off our fucking asses and decide to fix this, where people stand up, ordinary people, enough of them, and say, like, fuck this bullshit. We are done with being screwed. And it will take the amount of pain that we will have to go through to reach that point, the amount of collapse and creative destruction and economic woe that we will have to go through to get there as a nation is disgusting. Like it will because like what normally happens in stages of crises, and like I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Fourth Turning.
No.
It's really interesting theory. Basically, it's like a scientist. It's like they tried to do a historical analysis based on the idea, like the like strong men make good times make weak men make hard times make strong men. They were trying to like look at like the wheels of history over like hundreds of years and generations and go like, is this a thing? And they basically came to the conclusion that what tends to happen is you have like crisis followed by period of rebuilding, coming together, institutions are strong, then slowly like people's like trust and beliefs in like ideals and values like degrades, people like institutions become corrupted, people become like apathetic about the system, and like all to a point where you get like this massive crisis again, and then you reset and you get back to the rebuilding.
Right.
Okay. And they like tracked like 13 cycles of this through American history. Really interesting book. And they predicted that the next one was going to come, the next crisis moment was going to be in 2025.
Oh.
Yeah. No, like some of like, scientists have and like historians have been like, this isn't like 100% accurate. You're making leaps. But like, I think the principle generally like stands in that like humans go through cycles where we like fight to defend the things that we believe in and stand up for like the values, rights, liberties that we have. And then, those like the people who have to fight for those, like it's really deeply instilled into them. And then as like generations go on, like the children and their children become more and more skeptical of the institutions that were built by their their ancestors, and eventually those things lose their purpose because it's no longer the people who were driving them initially. And everything sort of like degrades to a point where something massive happens and you have to go, oh fuck, right, we need to fix this. And I think that's normally what happens in like on a shorter term as well within like economies. Like you get like a big like financial bubble or crash or something. And what used to happen was, there's a big problem, right? We need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And then what happened after 2007 is when, oh fuck, right, that's a really bad. Actually, no, look over here. Look, it's the immigrants.
Well,
it's the refugees. They're the problem.
What they did sometime between the 90s and 2008 was they figured out a way to profit from those things. They were like, oh shit, like there's a crash. Oh, have we sold too many of these dog shit mortgages? Oh, we have. Okay. Well, in that case, we'll do X, Y, and Z. And as you said earlier, they started printing money, funneling it, and making sure that the very top of the financial tree was catered for, right?
Mm-hmm. And they bailed them out every time.
It's interesting though, like, so if we play with this idea of, every so often there is effectively a collapse, fueled by mistrust, by brittle systems that are not developed, by institutions that are no longer driven by people who originally architected them and therefore had the drive and the passion to maintain them, and so on. Which are we actually talking? Are we talking about, like, on a domestic level, like the UK could collapse? Are we talking about something as far spanning as the EU? Or are we going up to neoliberalism? Or are we going up to Western liberal capitalism? Like,
I think the decision about what to do with it comes on pretty much like a national basis.
Right.
I think the collapse, the crashes or the crises can be like international.
Mm.
So like the last cycle that they point to started after World War II, basically. Everything fell apart around the world, basically. There was like a lot of hardship that people had to go through because of the war. And then after that, you go, right, okay, so we fought for these things. Then that was their like reset there. Okay, let's rebuild. So unfortunately, I hope it's not a war.
Mm.
But like I don't know. Do you know what the problem is? It's just like I don't see a path through to the other side that isn't through the fire.
Mm.
I don't see a place. I don't see a way to. I don't see a path to prosperity that isn't riddled with hardships before it. Because if you're gonna be Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto and do all that, like you're gonna have to endure the possibility of capital flight. You're gonna have to like if you're gonna like build an economy based on companies that want to be here and want to make stuff here and want to pay tax here, you're gonna have to watch the other ones die first and everyone become unemployed. Like it's
or nationalize the existing ones.
Or national, but then you can't nationalize everything.
Well, then we get back to the sort of devaluing of the currency, don't we? Like, what are you going to do? Write a fucking check for like 2 trillion and buy out like a whole industry sector? Like, let's see what that does to the markets, lads. Like,
because the Labour idea had been to basically just not renew the contracts, right? So that it wouldn't be like all of a sudden you had to shell out like 100 billion. It would have been just like, okay, so slowly we're going to not renew the contracts and then we're going to invest that money in. It was going to be phased. So like, but like I said, we have to go through we're going to have to go through something fucking awful, I think, to get through to the other side. And unfortunately, the worst part is we may not even get to another side. We may just go through a 2007, 2.0. No lessons learned. Everyone gets poorer and the rich are fine in a year or two. So our two options are do something about it or get fucked again.
That's a perfectly downbeat ending to this episode. Thank you so much to Josh Hamilton, my guest for this evening. Do go and check out his podcast. It's called Chatter. You can find it on the Gist website and I'm sure a myriad other places. I'm going to be back next Wednesday for the solo show, but I'll also be back next Friday night, 7:30, same time as usual, with a guest. If you're not on the Patreon yet, do consider it. Jump on patreon.com/Aid Thompson. All of my Patreon backers get episodes of the podcast 2 days ahead of everyone else. You also get access to the Discord chat. I pop in there every day. We talk shit about Tories. It's a good time. You also get first look at the tickets for the live show. So myself and Danny fucking Price did a gig at 21 Soho. That was in February. I'm going to be doing something at Glastonbury. Obviously, I can't, doesn't matter if you go on Patreon or not. I'm not getting you Glastonbury tickets. But I am doing another gig this time.
Might.
Oh, maybe. I'll see what I can do, guys. But I'm going to be doing something like sort of myself to celebrate the goal that we've achieved with Patreon. I styled my Patreon as a cult, and we've reached 21 members, and that was one of my goals. I was like, do you know what? When we hit that, and actually, it's just this show has just tickled the balls, Josh, of the top 10 politics charts. So
nice.
So I'm feeling pretty good. I feel like we need to celebrate that, and so there's this gig I'm putting on probably late August, September, and tickets for that will go out to Patreons first also. It's going to be very culty, very Kool-Aid. There's going to be a fishbowl of Kool-Aid in the corner. There's going to be psalms, like
I'm there.
Stand-up comedic psalms, like a fucked up beery Sunday service. It's going to be fun. So yeah, jump on patreon.com/Aid Thompson. Until next time, guys, keep it booge. Keep it strictly #Binfluencer, and I'm out this motherfucker. Yo, yo, yo. This episode was powered by my Patreon backers over at patreon.com/Aid Thompson. Special shout outs to Bowman, Chris, David, Mojo Sabian, Pingu, T-Rex in a top hat, Aaron, Alex, and Kai. Some of these names might not actually be the real names. Jeff, Peter, Sarah, Silent, and Ailsa, and then Anthony, Eddie, Fat Shirley, Mal, Rodri, Stuart, and Kerry. Thank you so much for continuing your support of the podcast, and I'm looking forward to catching up with each of you at the next London meet or the next gig. I don't know. Big doff of the cap to all of you. You give my funny bone a funny boner. Cheers.